Thank you everybody for coming. I'm about to give my speech for my persuasion, advocacy, and defense speech on God's faithfulness through hardship. So we have lots of people here. All right. In Sound and Services Media's video, they share a really wonderful story about the greatest tightrope walker in the history of the world. His name was Charles Blondie, and one of his most amazing feats was he stretched a tightrope across the Niagara Falls and walked that 11,000 feet long tightrope, which was 160 feet above the raging waters of Niagara Falls. And he did this with a number of theatric variations, blindfolded. He did it with a sack on his back. He did it with stilts. He even pushed a wheelbarrow across that amazing tightrope. Well, one day after he had done this feat of pushing the wheelbarrow across the falls, he asked the gathered crowd, do any of you believe that I could put a man in this wheelbarrow and safely push him across the falls? And everybody yelled, and everybody said they believed, until he asked for a volunteer. And it grew very quiet, until one man stood out of the crowd and got into the wheelbarrow. Now the question that video asked and that I want to ask you today is this. There's a difference between the man in the crowd and the man in the wheelbarrow in regards to God. Where are you? You know, as 2018 draws to a close, a lot of people are facing significant hardships. It's easy to trust in God when we're standing safely on the shore, when everything's going well in our lives. It's completely another matter when we're halfway across the falls and we hear the raging waters roaring beneath us and our life seems to be falling apart. It's harder to trust in God when you face sickness, when loved ones that you love are facing sickness, when death meets you and grief surrounds you in its grip. It's a completely another matter to trust God then, because it's then that we cry out to God and we ask for an answer why. And when he seems to not give us the answers we want, it shakes our faith. The truth is, though, that God is always faithful. He loves you absolutely. He loves you unconditionally. He loves you unfailingly. And yet the fact that there is pain and suffering in the world causes many people to doubt the existence of an all-loving, all-caring, all-powerful, all-knowing God. But the American philosopher Alvin Karl Plantinga proposed this. He said that it is possible for a world containing creatures who are free to perform more good than evil actions is more valuable than a world containing no free creatures at all. Without free will, he says, to choose to do good over evil, God would have created slaves incapable of independent choice. Imagine if you wanted to insult someone, but the air refused to send up the vibrations so that the person you were intending to insult didn't hear your jab. Wow, there goes your First Amendment right. Plantinga therefore concluded, the fact that free creatures sometimes go wrong, however, counts neither against God's omnipotence nor against his goodness. For he could have forestalled the occurrence of moral evil only by removing the possibility of moral good. You know, as a result of our freedom, a rebellion against the original design has taken place. The world we live in is no longer the perfect world that God originally created, and every aspect of the world is affected by our sin. And the world has been sending up distress signals ever since. Tornadoes, something is wrong. Hurricanes, something is wrong. Diseases, something is wrong. As famous author C.S. Lewis states, we can ignore even pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasure. He speaks to our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. No, the truth is that God is not pleased with the state of the world as it is. And the story of the Bible, from the first in the beginning to the final amen of Revelations 22:21, is God's redemption story of redeeming this fallen world for every single human being that is here. It is God's plan to redeem us to the state of perfection, and that plan is Jesus. Jesus is God's plan of redemption for the fallen world. He stooped down and joined us in our pain. And we see this through the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross for our behalf. Jesus is God's greatest example of his faithfulness, and he's proven himself time and time again. You know, this message hits really close to home for me. In 2012, in February, my mom was diagnosed with leukemia. She was given 3 months to live without treatment and only a 20% chance of surviving that treatment because it was so invasive. And one night when it looked like she wasn't going to make it, I was up late arguing with God. You know, my mom and I are so close. She's my mentor, she's my best friend, and I couldn't imagine a world without her in it. And I remember just wanting an answer why God would take such a wonderful person. And in my pain and my anger, I yelled and I cried and finally just asked God, if you care for me at all, would you just show me? There was no loud rumble. There was no whisper in the wind. There was nothing. And I went to bed with my faith shaken. But a couple minutes later, I heard the little patter of feet coming down the hall. It was my then 7-year-old son. Keone, what are you doing up at 1 a.m? You should be in bed. Mommy, God woke me up and told me to tell you he loves you. He gave me a kiss. He gave me a hug. Went back to bed and didn't remember it in the morning. Charles Blondin gave us a beautiful example of faith when he asked for somebody to come out of the crowd and get into his wheelbarrow. He had proven himself trustworthy. The number of times he had safely made it across that tightrope to show that he was going to usher them safely. God has proven himself 1,000 times more throughout the centuries again and again of his faithfulness. God has proven himself, and there is a difference, I said, between the man in a wheelbarrow and the man in the crowd. And as the video states, it doesn't really matter when you're standing safely on the shore, but it makes a lot of difference when you're halfway across the falls. In our everyday lives, in our choices, we can play it safe. We can stay on the shore. We can get into the wheelbarrow and trust God to push us safely across the trials and troubles of our lives. There's a difference between the man in the wheelbarrow and the one on the shore in regards to God. Where are you? Yeah.
Yes. Is that next Sunday?
I don't know how to turn it